Hi Gordon. Today what we're going to do is show you how to do a Schedule A maintenance procedure on the C Series Mercedes that came out in the mid to late 90s. The particular automobile we're going to use as an example is the C230. It's a little four-cylinder turbocharged gas engine. It's a great little engine, has lots of pep, and very popular. But they have what they call a maintenance procedure, a Schedule A maintenance procedure, and essentially what they do is they change the oil, and the book calls for synthetic oil. They change the oil and they check the brake pads, and they reset the FSS indicator, and that's the thing we need to reset to 0. So we'll show you how to reset that. But if we look at the tools that we need, it's real simple. We need a nut driver or an 8mm socket would work. We've got an 8mm nut driver. What it's used for is to take a little plastic skid plate off the bottom end of the engine so that we can get to the oil drain plug. And then the oil drain plug is removed with a 13mm socket, and of course we've got a ratchet just for ease. You could actually use an open end wrench if that's all you had. And then to change the filter, what we need is a little filter wrench. It's a 76mm. And it fits over the filter housing and unscrews it. And what we need is a standard 3/8 inch drive that fits into that, and then a ratchet. So that's how we take the filter housing off and pull the filter out of its housing. Now the filter comes with an O-ring seal that seals the lid onto the filter housing, and you notice there's also a little copper ring in there. That copper is used on the oil plug. That's the little crush washer that goes on the oil plug. So when you drain the oil plug, you throw the old one away and put a new one on there, and we'll show you how to do that. So we've got the filter and the tools and some Mobil 1 extended, and so let's get to it. An 8mm nut driver, and there are 4 little screws, one right here, and then there's one in the very back here and one here. So we're going to take those 4 screws off, and the plastic plate, which is just a shield on the underside of the engine, drops right off. That way we can get to the drain plug. Today we've got this car up on a hoist. Of course most homeowners don't have a hoist, but you can just jack it up. If you were to jack it up, put the jack stands here, underneath here, one right here and one right here under the A-frame. So you got one on each side of the A-frame. About 6 inches in from the wheel there's a little hole where the spring is, and I would just put the yoke of a jack stand right there. Jack it up far enough to where you can safely get underneath it and work. We have the convenience now of a hoist, and so it's easier to film and show this particular job if we use the hoist. So these are just sheet metal screws that hold this plastic plate up, and as we take them down, I just drop them in the pan. Now the oil plug is here. Now we can get to it. And as we said before, this particular engine holds 7.9 quarts. I just use 8 quarts of oil. We're going to use synthetic in it. So now that looks like a 13mm, as we said before. Now we're just going to drain the oil. And of course, again, I've got the convenience of this type of shop equipment, and most homeowners would just be using a drain pan, but it's the same process. It's a 13mm drain plug. Okay, now like we told you before, when you buy a filter, a little copper ring comes with it. That's a sealing ring that goes on that oil plug, and it's made to crush. It's made to clamp down, you know, and it kind of crushes, and that's what makes it seal. So it goes, you know, on the oil plug, and that's just part of the filter kit that comes with the filter when you buy it. So you want to get that snug, nice and snug, and so now we've got the oil drain. The oil change part includes the filter as well, and we need to go up under the hood and get that. But before we do that, of course, we've got to replace this plastic cover that we took off the bottom end of the engine. So I'll just move this out of the way, and of course it just goes on backwards to the way it came off. Okay, so we're going to put this plastic cover back on the underside of the engine, and notice it indexes here. There's a little plastic piece that indexes into that hole. So it indexes one on that side and one on the other side, and of course it goes underneath. It looks like, yeah, sorry, underneath the bumper up here. So let me try to get this back in first. If I can just get a couple of them started, they'll hold it up. Now see, I've got it indexed here, and I've got it underneath the bumper here, and it lines right up. It's really quite simple. Okay, so now I'm tightening the last one, and so we got it indexed on each side, and all four of them are tight. Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't get this one tight enough yet. Okay, well, all of these are tight, and so now we're ready to go up top. Now we're on top, and we've drained the oil out, and we've got to change the filter, and this is the C230. So this is the little 4-cylinder 2.3, and the oil filter is toward the front of the engine on the driver's side right there, and this is the cap on top of the oil filter, and this is the little 76 millimeter, almost like a socket affair, and these things aren't on there very tight, but we need to take that off first. And after we take that off, it's just a screw-on cap affair. And there's an O-ring seal, you notice, right along the base of it. I'll take it off in a moment. Usually it takes a little screwdriver underneath it to get it pried away. Let me just set it aside for a minute. Usually what I do is get a paper towel to put underneath that filter. So now, as I say, I always get a piece of paper because these things are kind of messy. And so to try to minimize the oil everywhere, I just take it out like that and throw it away. Now, of course, you can't put that in recycle, so just be careful. Okay, so, and actually you couldn't get it on there backwards because the hole would be the size that fits on a tube down there. If I look, I don't know if I can see this with the drop light. Let me try. You see down inside that filter housing, there's a tube that sticks up. And the hole that's in the filter slides over that tube. It's indexed to that. So you just have to push it down in there, and that's where it fits. Yep. It bottoms out, so you can feel it when it's in there far enough. Okay, so there's a little O-ring that we need to take off and put the new one on there. And you can see I just put a screwdriver underneath it. And so the new O-ring should go on there very simply. And it goes in a little groove. It'll be very obvious. Okay, now usually what I do is just wipe it off. Now you see there's a little index in the top of the thing. And that's going to fit right down inside a notch in that filter. So as we screw this thing on there, you can see that the threads will have to go all the way down, and the only way they'll go down is if that little index is in the right spot, catches. And so it really is quicker if you have this wrench. It's kind of a self-seating little device. Now you don't want to make this too tight. You can feel it when it starts to get tight. But you don't want it on there too tight. That O-ring seal will seal up very nicely, and you'll break that piece of plastic if you try to tighten it down too tight. So be very careful, don't over tighten that thing. Now we're ready to put some oil in there and reset the FSS indicator. So I always use a funnel, and we're putting this synthetic Mobil 1 inside, and recall it takes 7.9, which is 8 quarts as far as I'm concerned, because you don't get every bit out of every quart. So we need to put 8 quarts of oil in it, and then we're going to reset the FSS indicator. Okay, so finally we've dumped all the oil in it, and let me just put that cap back on. Now the next thing we have to do, the last thing under the hood really, is to make sure that oil filter doesn't leak. And so we have to start the engine up to do that. And probably the best thing to do is be clean off any oil that may have dripped as you took that oil filter out, because the idea is to see if any oil comes out from around the top of that canister right there. So we want to make sure that when we start and run the engine, there's no oil that comes out right around the top. So we have to start it up in order to check that. Okay, we were in a closed garage, so I obviously opened up the doors to the garage before I started the engine. And now, if we let it run for just a couple of minutes is all it takes to fill up that oil filter and to fill up that reservoir where the oil filter is. You can see there's no oil coming from around there. If it's leaking, it'll be real obvious. But we just want to make sure we don't have any leak in that filter. And so we don't. And now we can turn the engine off and reset the FSS indicator. So we're going to do the flexible service indicator. So reset it. So the first thing we do is turn the key to position 2. 1, 2. And hit the button twice. And we see that it's at the interval. Now we turn it off. Now we turn it to hit the hold the 0 button down and turn it back on. And wait 10 seconds until we get a tone. And finally we get a tone, and you can see that we've got it reset to 10,000 miles. Now we can turn the key off. Now, one of the things that's included in what the Mercedes dealer calls Schedule A maintenance is to check the brake linings, the brake pads. The front brake pads have sensors on them, and so you will get a little red light in the dash compartment, and it'll be very obvious that indicates when the front pads are bad. But the back pads don't have a sensor, and periodically you need to check those back pads, and that would be done in the Schedule A maintenance, where you look at the back pads and just see how much lining, how much wear they still have left on the back pads. All you need to do to check those back pads is to pull one of the rear wheels off and to look at them. So we're going to show you how to do that, just so you see whether the back pad has plenty of wear left. So all we need is, as we said before, that 17mm wrench with a breaker bar or a lug wrench. The lug wrench that's in the trunk of your car will work fine. We're going to use an impact wrench because that's what we have and it's so quick. But all you have to do is jack the back wheel up and check, take the tire off, and we'll show you what to look for once you get the tire off. So you could use the standard jack that's with your Mercedes and jack the back wheel up, take the tire off, and look. So let's take a look at these pads. Now, as long as we're under here, we might thought we might show you where that front sensor is. The front sensor on the front brake caliper is the thing that determines it actually shorts out to ground whenever the pad wears out. And I'll show you where it is. There's a wire. This is the caliper. I don't know if you can see this where my finger is pointing, Gordon, but this is the caliper, and right there is where the sense wire is. And so when the pads on this caliper wear out, there's a little indicator light that will let you know that up in the passenger compartment. And you've probably got at least 2,000 or 3,000 miles before you really have to change those pads. It lets you know in enough time to where you don't wreck the rotors on the car. So our experience is you probably still have another 2,000 or 3,000 miles to go before you absolutely have to change those pads. It does give you a little warning. Now, as I said, what you would do normally is just use a lug wrench and the jack that comes with your car, but we're going to use a impact wrench to pull this wheel. And we'll show you what to look for once we pull this wheel off. Now, these pads, as it turns out, are real good. Back pads last a long, long time compared to front pads. You probably go through about 3 or 4 sets of front pads before you change the back pads. This is the caliper. This thing is called the rotor. The caliper pushes on a little pad that looks like that, and there's 2 of them, one on each side of that rotor. And you see the thickness of the lining. You see that it's got metal here. I've got a brand new pad that goes on this car here. There's the metal, and there is the thickness of the lining. And you see that you can wear that lining all the way down toward that metal, and you really don't want metal to touch against metal. But finally, you need to change those pads. But realistically, depends on highway driving versus city driving. A lot of stop and go driving obviously wears out the pads a lot quicker, but it's pretty realistic to think that one of these cars could go 60 to 70,000 miles without ever changing the back pads, and maybe 100,000 depending upon, you know, whether you're highway or city driving. At any rate, that's a brand new pad. That's one that's been on there a while. You can see there's very little difference between those 2 wear points. This one is almost as thick as that one. And finally, when it wears all the way out, you need to change the pads. That's for another video. We'll show you how to do that in a video to come. But these pads are good, so we're going to put this back on there. And that's what they would have done during this maintenance schedule at any dealership or Mercedes shop. They would have checked these pads to make sure they're still good, because there's no sensor on the back pads. Now, while we're under here, we might as well point out a few other things that they would probably look at if they performed a routine service. They would at least look at this windshield wiper fluid to make sure that it was near the top of the reservoir. It's kind of hard to see, it's a clear liquid, but it's down about 1 inch in there. I don't know if Gordon, you see where it is. I can touch it with my finger. That's the brake fluid, that's the windshield washer. Just take standard windshield washer fluid. You probably shouldn't put just straight water in there because it'll freeze. The brake fluid is right here. There's a little reservoir. You can see that normally it's got a min mark way down toward the bottom. The minimum is right down there. It says min. And then you don't want to fill it all the way up to the top. About halfway up in the reservoir is pretty normal. Usually there's a max mark. I don't see one on this one, but typically it's up between the middle of the reservoir and the top of the reservoir is where it'll run. And you can see, if you have a real good eye and that camera's good enough, the fluid level is right at the seam of that reservoir in this particular one, so it's fine. It's well above that minimum. And then, of course, the overflow tank for the radiator is here. I usually don't mess with them. If I can see that it's got some water or fluid in there, coolant, and that one is right there, is where the level is, which is about right. It needs about 1 inch or 2 from the top in order to have some room for expansion and contraction. But these things are under pressure, and I typically don't mess with them at least until they've cooled way down. Don't ever pop one of those radiator caps. It's under pressure. So wait till the engine is cool and then you can open it. I'll show you, because this engine's been sitting here for a long time, this won't have any pressure. And it's got usually two positions. It turns and it sort of locks right there, and that's typically the way you let the pressure off of it, and then you twist it all the way down to pressurize the system. But don't ever open one when it's hot. I've already popped the little catches on the air filter, but there is an air filter under here. And so it just latches down with these latches that I've unlatched. So there's one there, there's one there. There's one on the bottom, and there's one way in the back. If you unlatch them all and undo this little overflow line, you can get to the air filter. And you don't want to pull this all the way up because you don't want to have to disconnect all these hoses. But you see the air filter is right there. And it comes out of there very readily. And this one is okay. It doesn't need to be changed. You can see they're always a little dirty after you've just got a few hundred miles on them, but it's still okay. And so you can put it back in there. You notice that the thick part goes toward the front of the car, the thin part goes toward the back. And then once you get it in there, it'll only really go in there one way. And then once you get the lid back down on the system, on the canister, then you need to snap the snaps back down. And you can feel it when it snaps into place. And so you got 5 of these snaps that you got to put back down. 4 of them are easy. The back one is kind of a little more difficult. My hand is small enough to where I can go all the way back around to the back and get it that way. So that's back. So those are routine things that they might check while it's in the shop. In addition, if you ever want to dipstick the oil, it's right here. And it should be on the full mark. We just changed it. Let's wipe off that dipstick and just see where it checks. So it's right up to the full. It's right up to the red indicator. There. You can see the little arrow, it points right to where the full position should be. So now let's set the FSS, the flexible service indicator. Okay, now one of the other things that's included in the Schedule A maintenance is to check the battery water acid to make sure that the level is up. So it's in the trunk. So we open the trunk. If we look, it's underneath this little cover. We lift the cover up. Voila, there's the battery. All we want to do is open up these caps and check and make sure that the level is above the plates. And it's going to be very, very tough to see with a camera. But if you look inside a battery, you're supposed to fill them up to the, at least get them above the plates, actually almost full. Not right up to the top of the caps, but close to it. And of course, in the old days, they told you use distilled water, but they don't really say that anymore. And these are low. And so you can't really even see any water in there. If you look very closely, there's none there. Or it's not up to the top of the plates. So I just add some regular, just water from a bottle typically to a battery. A battery is only going to last between 2 and 3 years typically, at least here in Arizona anyway. So I've not found that distilled water makes any difference at all. So funnel, I just spill a little bit of water sometimes, just water. You just want to add enough to get it up well above the plates and toward the top of the right there. You can see that it's right up near the top now. So we want to do that for every single cell.